Well, good morning again. Can we tell our young adults how proud we are of them one more time? Wonderful job, you guys. Thank you so much for leading us this morning. So proud of you. Has anyone gone to see the Barbie movie? Raise your hand. A couple, a handful. I'm looking at this section right here. Amazing. Okay, there's a Barbie movie out. Do you guys at least know that there's a Barbie movie out? Yeah, cool, because social media has been all over it, right? Like everybody's been talking about this Barbie movie, Barbieheimer. If you go see Oppenheimer and Barbie, it's a whole giant thing. I haven't seen Oppenheimer yet, but I have seen Barbie, okay? If you're surprised by that, welcome to Anona. My name is Casey. We've obviously never met before. I loved it. People who have seen it, did you like it? Okay, we'll work on our enthusiasm later, you guys. Amazing. So I loved it. I was really skeptical because I was like, why? I didn't know much about the movie at first, but I just saw everybody on social media going crazy about this Barbie movie. And I'm like, cool. Like I played with Barbies when I was a kid too, but I mean, they're dolls. Like, why are we so excited about this movie, right? I learned a little bit more about it and I was like, oh, no, that's totally up my alley. I want to go see it. So I'm going to give you just the basic plot line. I'm not going to give you spoilers. I know that people in the past have been very concerned when I preach about movies that I'm going to give away the ending. If you were there, you were there. Am I right? So I'm not going to give you the whole ending, but I'm just going to tell you the basic plot line. It was so good. Okay, so story begins. All the Barbies live in Barbie world, as they should. Barbie world is where everything is just as it should be. I'm watching the opening and I'm like, I think, logically speaking, from an intellectual standpoint, this is an accurate depiction of heaven. All of my theological training has led me to this point, as I think they got it, okay? So it opens up, everything is pink and sparkly, and everyone is happy, and all of the women are empowered, and everybody is confident and cheers each other on, and everything is exactly the way that it should be. The opening scene, I'm literally grinning from ear to ear, like, I want this to be my life. Like, I want to wake up in Barbie land. It was lovely. But then suddenly, things start to go awry. Things start to malfunction in Barbie land, and they realize something must be terribly wrong in the real world. Someone who is playing with them in the real world must be going through something bad, and it's trickling down into Barbie world, okay? So they decide that this one Barbie, the main character Barbie, is going to go into the real world, and she's going to fix whatever is broken so that everything in Barbie land will be restored. So she does. She sets off on her quest. She goes into the real world, and she's expecting the real world to look a whole lot like Barbie world. Because in Barbie world, like I said, everyone's empowered. Everybody is treated fairly. Everything's pink and sparkly and lovely. And she thinks the real world must look similar because Barbie must have had this wonderful effect on things to encourage all of these empowerments and confidence and all of this stuff. She is very disappointed when she gets to the real world and finds that it is really nothing like she expected. First thing that happens is she walks by a group of construction workers, and instead of just being spoken to with kindness and respect, she's talked to disrespectfully. She's confused. This never happened in Barbie world. Then she goes and tries to find the little girl that she thinks is playing with her, and instead of this little girl loving her and being so excited that she's there, she yells at her, and she's mean, and she's angry, and she's upset at the effect that Barbie has had on the world. In a very real way, Barbie did not have the effect that she thought that Barbies did on this real world. And she's so let down and so disappointed, and she can't believe that this is what the world actually is because it's nothing like what she thought it would be. And I'm watching this, and I'm just thinking, how many of us have been there? How many of us have had an idea about the world or the way life should work or the way relationships should work or the way our faith journeys are going to go, whatever it is, we've had this one idea and then life happens and suddenly everything we thought we knew does not seem so certain anymore. We feel like we are dropped into a world that we didn't expect and that we didn't prepare for. My friends, my thought for today is what do we do when those things happen? And even more specific for our story today that we're going to unpack is, what do we do when those things don't just happen one time, but they happen again and again and again? We're in this sermon series on waiting and how we wait for things in our faith. And there's this concept in the Bible that patience, the word for patience, can sometimes get interchanged with another phrase, and that is long suffering. And it's that idea that you are enduring multiple hardships again and again and again. And it's a thing that I think our character today in our Bible story wrestled with many a time, one that maybe we have wrestled with too. Today we are looking at the story of the bleeding woman. That is the only name that she is given. We don't know her real name. She is remembered only by this condition that she had, which I think is less than respectful. I wish that the biblical authors would have given her a different name, maybe call her the strong woman or the persevering woman or the woman who never gave up or the woman who touched Jesus, whatever. But instead, we only remember her as this condition that she had. And she is someone who I think if we can look to anybody for an idea on getting through those times of long suffering, I think she's a pretty good example to follow. So today we are in Mark chapter 5, and we are starting at verse 25. It says this: "And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors, and she had spent all she had. And yet, instead of getting better, she grew worse." Those are two sentences that we can really quickly gloss over pretty easily because we want to get to the good part, right? This is the setup. This is the bad situation, but we know things are going to get better. So let's get to the end. Let's get to the good part. But when we do that, we miss how bad this really was. It says 12 years she was dealing with this. I can't be sick for 12 minutes without complaining. 12 years. I don't think that number is literal. Usually when you see 12 in the Bible, it is an allusion to the 12 tribes of Israel, or this might be trying to connect it with, there's another story right around this one where Jesus heals a 12-year-old girl. So it's more than likely this is being used for imagery, but nonetheless, we can assume that it was a long time that this woman was suffering. And she's going through blow after blow after blow. First thing is she's sick. That's bad enough. You don't feel good. I remember one time I had food poisoning and I called my dad. I lived in Tampa at the time and I was literally like, "Dad, I think I'm dying. Like I'm pretty sure I'm gonna die on the bathroom floor." And he was like, "You're not dying. This is gonna be done in 24 hours. Call me tomorrow." Like literally, he was like, "Baby, I love you, but I'm not coming up there. You're gonna be all right." She doesn't feel good. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is she goes to a doctor, right? She's probably still pretty hopeful at this point. She goes to the doctor to try to get better. Doctor says, "I can't help you. I don't know what's going on with you, but thanks for your copay." All right. So maybe she's still a little bit hopeful because she's like, okay, it's just one doctor. There's more. I'm going to try someone else. Different schools of thought. I'm going to try another doctor. She goes to another doctor. "No, yeah, I looked. I don't know what's going on. I can't help you, but thanks for your copay." Again and again and again. How many times could you go through that in 12 years? She must have seen every doctor in her area, maybe multiple times. It says then she spent all she had. So not only is she sick, and then all the people that are supposed to be able to help her can't, and then she spends all she has. She didn't have a savings account. She didn't have health insurance. She had no more money. She was out of resources. It was not easy for women back in those days to have a living in general, and now she's spent everything. She's done. She's depleted. And it's not like her sickness is just staying stagnant. It says instead of getting better, she grew worse. Worse. So now she feels even worse. She's more exhausted. She's physically in pain. She's uncomfortable. And she has no more money to her name. So it's blow after blow after blow for this woman. Not only that, It gets even worse because this particular sickness that she was dealing with would have rendered her as ceremonially unclean back in those days. And so for us, if we're going through a hard time, we always encourage everybody like, hey, circle the wagons, like check in on your people. Let's bring meals. We're going to be together, right? She didn't have that because she was ceremonially unclean, which means no one could touch her or else they'd be unclean. So she would have been alone in her own little part of the village. So she's going through all of this by herself. She has no support. She has no community. And on top of that, it would have meant that she was unmarried, more than likely, because no one can get near her. So now you've got a sick, totally broke, unmarried woman back in the Bible days. What chance did she have? And it's just been thing after thing after thing for 12 years. I can't imagine the feeling of defeat that would be inside of her. I can't imagine that. To me, when I read this story, I think, man, this woman would have had every right in the world. I don't think any of us could have, with good conscience, faulted her if she just gave up. If at this point she was just like, listen, I can't keep putting myself through this. I can't keep going to more doctors. I have no more money. I'm just going to, hold myself up in this little corner of the village. I'm going to ride out my days, and that's it. I don't think any of us could have faulted her for that. And yet the response she has here in our story is something so different than that, which is what makes it so inspiring to me. If we continue on into verse 27, it says, when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and she touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. If I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. She still had that little ounce of hope in there. And she said, I'm going to do it. If I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? You see the people crowding against you, his disciples answered, and yet you ask who touched me? Like 1 million people touched you, Jesus. What are you talking about? But Jesus kept looking around to see who'd done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. She probably thinks she's about to get in big trouble because she didn't only touch a man without his consent, she touched a rabbi without his consent, and she was unclean. So she thinks that she just defiled this rabbi. And so when he whips around and says, who touched me, she is so afraid. She thinks she's going to get in big trouble. She's trembling in fear. But Jesus said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. To me, one of the greatest challenges about going through periods of waiting or long suffering or those times in life where it's just thing after thing after thing, it's not only the challenges we're facing, those are hard enough on their own, but it's also what those times do to our hearts, our outlook, our perspective. Those times can take us from being people that are hopeful, that are optimistic, that believe in the good in the world. And those times have the possibility to turn us into people who are guarded, cynical, who keep ourselves locked away from things because we just don't want to be hurt again. My friends, that's why what strikes me most about this woman is not that she made it 12 years with this condition. That's amazing. That's admirable that she hung in there. But the thing that hits me even harder than that is that after all she had been through, after blow after blow after blow, she still had it, even if it was just a split second, even if it was fleeting, even if it only lasted a moment, she still had just the tiniest ounce of hope inside of her. She still believed for a moment that maybe good was still out there. If I just touch his cloak, I'll be healed. She still had just a little bit of hope left. Anyone who has suffered hurt or loss or illness or trauma can tell you that is no small feat, right? Am I alone in that? It is no small feat to be able to muster up that hope after disappointment. It takes risk and courage and vulnerability. The truth is, I related to the plot of the Barbie movie in more ways than one. There's so much there that is relatable, but specifically, I feel like for me, when I was watching that movie and watching this person, this character, wrestle with life not turning out the way she thought, I can relate to that, and maybe some of you can too. For us in our family, there was a couple years between 2020 and 2022-ish where for us, I always jokingly call it like the series of unfortunate events. It was just 2 years of just nonstop. Like every time we thought we were coming up for air, every time we thought things were calming back down, we'd get another phone call. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to answer my phone anymore, right? Ever been in those moments? For me, I remember for a while there, every time someone would call me out of the blue, I'd answer the phone, and in one breath, I'd say, hey, everything okay? Over and over again. I didn't even realize I was doing it. And finally, one of my friends was like, do you know that you do that now? And I'm like, nope, but I just have to know if someone's calling me out of the blue, hey, is this good news or bad news? You calling me to hang out, or you calling to ruin my life? Like, which one is it? So for a while, I didn't want to answer my phone, right? Because it was just one thing after another. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. And for me, because of those experiences, I have more days than I'd like to admit, or if I'm honest with myself, if I put myself in the shoes of this woman, and if I saw Jesus walking by, I don't know that I'd always reach out. Hope takes courage. Hope takes vulnerability. Hope is a risk. And there's times where I'm like, nah, like just you do your thing over there, Jesus. Like, I'm just going to stay right here. I don't know that I'd always have that courage. But this woman shows us that there's another option. She shows us that the only option after suffering, after a period of waiting, is not to hold ourselves up and stay guarded and stay cynical. One of my favorite quotes is, behind every cynic is just a broken-hearted romantic. I think how true and how poetic is that? She shows us that there is another way. And that one act, that 1 ounce of hope that she mustered up, it brought her to a place that she had only long been dreaming of. If you've ever heard me preach, you know that I really like to do word studies. And as we're going into our wrap up here, there were 3 words that really struck me in this story. The first word for healed, the word for freed, and then the second word for healed, which in our Bibles is translated as the same word, but it's actually 2 different words in the Greek. Fun fact. Now you know some Bible knowledge. You can impress all your friends. All 3 of those words, in addition to the words that they got translated into in English, could also be translated into something else. All 3 of those words could also mean wholeness. Whole. To be made whole. This woman's moment of hope brought her from a place of brokenness to a place of wholeness. Her single act of hope in this one brave, audacious moment of her breaking all the rules, defying disappointment, and stepping out of cynicism, she put herself out there for probably the millionth time. And she was finally made whole. She saw that good still existed and it was still a possibility for her. And for at least this moment, her suffering was over. So my friends, my question for us today is, what if we could be made whole again? What if wholeness was a possibility for us? What would we do and who would we be if we believed that good was still out there, that the only thing on the other end of the phone was not tragedy? What would we do if we believed that things could work out? For as many times as life has told us that it can't, for as many times as life has let us down, what if we believed that things could actually work out? What would you do? Would you start that business? Would you call that person? Would you go back to school? Would you share your story? Friends, how would you live if you believed that good was still out there and that wholeness was still a possibility. Reaching out is a risk. Reaching out takes courage. We know that opening ourselves up can lead to pain and disappointment, but so can keeping ourselves closed off. We can get hurt in our hopefulness, but we can also get hurt if we don't hope. Which one do we want to be? Who do we want to be? And how would our lives look different if we had the idea, the attitude, the little glimmer inside of us that said, maybe this time it could be different? If we believe this story, we believe that wholeness is somehow connected to this man, Jesus, we claim to follow, we seek to follow. I don't want to miss what wholeness could be there. And I don't want you to either. My invitation for us this week is to just maybe reach out just once and just consider the possibility that wholeness could still be out there. Let's pray. God, we thank you that in the midst of all of life's hardships and brokenness, that wholeness is still a possibility, that good things still happen, and God, that good things can still happen to us, even us. Help us to have hope. Restore the hope that maybe life has taken from us. Help us to not forget about the bad things that have happened, because we will take those experiences with us. But God, help us to see where good still exists. Show us those places where good is still in the world and where good can still happen for us. Help us to reach out and try just one more time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I won't tell you how the Barbie movie ends because I'm not a monster, and I want you to go see it if you haven't yet because it's wonderful. But I will tell you this, that even though Barbie learned that the world wasn't what she thought it would be, she still found good there in this new world. My friends, let us, even just for a moment, muster up enough courage to believe that in our stories, whatever we've gone through, that good can still be here as well. God bless you, and go in peace.